The Middle East is a region of Asia that Europeans historically referred to as the Middle of the East, a somewhat arbitrary name. This area is crucial because it is the birthplace of civilization, centered around modern-day Iraq. Over centuries, the borders in this region have been repeatedly redrawn due to the rise and fall of empires. A major recent reshaping of these borders was done by European powers, the British, French, and Russians, especially following agreements like the 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement. These powers divided the region without considering the ethnic, linguistic, or cultural identities of the people living there, resulting in arbitrary borders that remain the basis of current national boundaries after the Europeans left. By the 1930s, after World War I and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the global balance was shifting. The war, fought with new mechanized weaponry powered by oil, underscored the strategic importance of oil reserves. Germany's defeat was partly due to inadequate oil supplies. Consequently, the rising U.S. superpower turned its attention eastward toward the Middle East to secure this valuable resource. Initially, the U.S. presence was minor, but it quickly expanded through alliances, covert operations, arms supplies, and eventually direct military involvement, effectively establishing dominance in the region. In that era, a California-based company began exploring Middle Eastern deserts for oil, marking the start of significant American economic interest 11,000 miles from San Francisco. This vast and arid region, about one-third the size of the United States, became pivotal in the global quest for oil. This context sets the stage for understanding how the modern Middle East was shaped by both European imperialism and emerging U.S. geopolitical interests focused on the region's oil wealth and strategic location. The California company's decision to explore for oil in the Saudi desert was indeed risky because they initially had no proof that oil was even there, risking the investments of thousands of stockholders on a venture that could fail completely. Additionally, this desert was part of Saudi Arabia, a deeply religious kingdom centered around Islam's holiest sites, Mecca and Medina, governed by a conservative royal family wary of outsiders, especially Western non-believers. Nonetheless, the Saudi king granted the California Arabian Standard Oil Company, KSOC, a subsidiary of Standard Oil of California, SoCal, permission to explore nearly 1 million square kilometers of desert. After several years of drilling through difficult conditions and initial dry wells, on March 3, 1938, at the Dammam No. 7 well near the coast, they struck oil, producing over 1,500 barrels on the first day, an astonishingly valuable find that transformed the kingdom's economy and geopolitical significance. As the oil flowed during the 1930s and 40s, American oil workers and their families began settling in the region, constructing company towns equipped with amenities like air-conditioned homes, hospitals, and outdoor movie theaters. These towns exhibited Western lifestyles, including women driving and alcohol consumption, which were in stark contrast to Saudi Arabia's conservative society, causing tension among locals. The U.S. government then sought to secure its interests by proposing a military base near the oil operations, which the Saudi royal family reluctantly accepted due to the immense revenues the oil brought. However, the Saudis imposed one condition: the U.S. could not fly the American flag on the base, only place a plaque, to maintain sovereignty and appease domestic opposition. The construction of this infrastructure was largely carried out by a Saudi company founded by Mohammed bin Laden, who had a large family. One of his sons, Osama bin Laden, would later become historically significant. Meanwhile, the relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia grew into a controversial but profitable alliance, drawing attention and criticism from other Middle Eastern nations. During the 1950s and 60s, U.S. involvement in the Middle East deepened not only for oil but also as a strategic move against the Soviet Union's expansionist aims. In Iran, for example, the U.S. and Britain orchestrated a coup to overthrow a democratically elected leader perceived as too aligned with Soviet interests, installing a dictatorship more friendly to Western powers. This complex interplay of oil discovery, American business and military presence, Saudi internal politics, and Cold War geopolitics set the stage for the modern Middle East's strategic importance. The oil discovery at Dammam No. 7 was the pivotal event confirming the presence of commercial oil in Saudi Arabia, first struck on March 3, 1938, at a depth of about 1,440 meters. This success came after previous non-productive wells and was due to the persistent efforts of American geologists supported by local knowledge. It led to the rapid expansion of oil infrastructure and the eventual formation of Saudi Aramco, making Saudi Arabia a global oil powerhouse. The airport in D.C. is named after John Foster Dulles, who authorized the 1953 U.S.-British coup in Iran that removed Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh to protect Western oil interests, marking a lasting reminder of U.S. involvement in the region. The U.S. then became deeply involved in the Middle East, backing Israel financially and militarily to support its position against hostile neighbors, despite debates at home about antagonizing oil-rich Arab countries. This support led to a significant backlash from Middle Eastern oil producers, causing major tensions and crises whose full impact is still unfolding. Meanwhile, in the 1970s, Mohammed bin Laden, a wealthy Saudi construction magnate, and his son Osama became increasingly troubled by their family's support for the U.S. presence in the Middle East, especially in the sacred lands of Mecca and Medina. Osama bin Laden, opposed to U.S. and Soviet intrusion, went to fight in Afghanistan against the Soviet invasion. The U.S. covertly supported these fighters, including Osama, providing weapons and funds during this brutal conflict. Concurrently, Iran underwent a religious revolution overthrowing the US-backed dictator and installing Ayatollah Khomeini, which fueled anti-American sentiment. Osama returned to Saudi Arabia after the Soviet defeat, deeply committed to opposing foreign superpowers' influence in the Islamic world. He founded al-Qaeda with a mission to defend Islam by violently resisting such powers. Saudi authorities, benefiting from a profitable alliance with the US, pressured Osama to stop his anti-American activities, eventually revoking his passport and silencing his rhetoric. This narrative captures how key Cold War and regional events, starting with covert operations authorized by figures like John Foster Dulles, shaped long-term conflicts and perceptions in the Middle East, influencing people like Osama bin Laden and the complex U.S.-Middle East relations that followed. Osama bin Laden saw Saddam Hussein, the secular and brutal leader of Iraq, as a bad Muslim who was not worthy of respect. Saddam used oil wealth to build palaces, statues of himself, and a massive army, the fourth largest in the world. When Saddam invaded Kuwait to control more oil, it alarmed Saudi Arabia, fearing Saddam might invade them next. Osama volunteered to lead fighters against Saddam, confident that faith and guerrilla tactics that formerly beat the Soviets could work again. However, Saudi leaders rejected him, doubting the effectiveness of his irregular forces against Saddam's powerful conventional military, especially given the threat of chemical and biological weapons. Instead, Saudi Arabia turned to the U.S. for help. Dick Cheney quickly mobilized a coalition of 37 countries and deployed overwhelming military power in what became the Gulf War, decisively defeating Saddam Hussein's forces and expelling them from Kuwait. This episode revealed the limits of Osama bin Laden's approach versus conventional military alliances when facing a large modern army. Additionally, despite some reported contacts in the 1990s between Iraq's government and bin Laden, detailed investigations and intelligence assessments, including the 9/11 Commission and Pentagon reports, conclude there was no operational alliance or cooperation between Saddam Hussein and al-Qaeda. Their goals and ideologies largely diverged, and interactions did not lead to joint attacks or coordination. Thus, in this critical moment, Saudis chose U.S. military power over Osama's volunteer fighters to confront Saddam's invasion. This choice set the stage for future geopolitical dynamics in the region. Following the 1991 Gulf War, the United States rapidly mobilized significant firepower, manpower, and military bases in Saudi Arabia to drive Saddam Hussein's forces out of Kuwait, quickly regaining favor with the Saudi royal family. This military buildup included expanding existing bases and establishing new ones, such as Prince Sultan Air Base, along with other facilities in Dammam, Khobar, and Tabuk. The U.S. presence was far larger and more permanent than before, serving not just immediate wartime purposes but becoming a long-term fixture in the region. However, this enduring U.S. military footprint in Saudi Arabia deeply unsettled many Saudis, including Osama bin Laden, who saw it as an unacceptable foreign occupation on Islamic Holy Land, Mecca and Medina. Bin Laden, rejected by his own country's leadership in favor of the Americans' conventional military intervention, intensified his radical opposition to the U.S., coordinating terrorist attacks worldwide throughout the 1990s. While the U.S. maintained about 5,000 troops in Saudi Arabia following the war, increasing at times, rising opposition and security concerns eventually led to a partial withdrawal in the early 2000s, with many forces relocating to bases in nearby Gulf states like Qatar. Nevertheless, the legacy of this prolonged American military presence became a central grievance cited by bin Laden and significantly shaped the dynamics of U.S. Middle East relations in the decades that followed. As we reflect on these complex histories and their lasting impact, what role do we each play in shaping the future of global relationships and peace? How can understanding these stories inspire us to challenge misconceptions and advocate for a more informed, compassionate world? If this insight has sparked your curiosity or moved you in any way, please like and share, because thoughtful conversations like this need to reach more minds, and together we can make a difference.